Who Watches the Rewatchers, a Buffy rewatch podcast.
Hello, my friends. Welcome to Who Watches the Rewatchers, our podcast, our rewatch podcast through the Buffy the Vampire, not the Buffy, but Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Today with me, my name's Jarrod. I'm with my good buddy Alan. We're talking about episode 6 of season 1, The Pack. How you doing, Alan?
I'm doing great. I had forgotten The Pack was next when last we spoke, and this one's infamous in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I actually really didn't expect it when it came up in the list, and I was like, oh yes, there's a lot to say about it, and I like, can I just say, since you've met, known, and worked with Nicholas Brennan in time, I think he does a great job in this episode.
I totally agree. Nikki, if I wanted to tease him a little bit, I would say he does a great job playing the psychotic, right?
Yeah, that's right. Well, here in this episode, it starts off, I believe the cold open is sort of a field trip to the zoo, where Buffy and all the school is. And there's some school bullies who I don't believe at all. I just want to throw out a comment on them. I mean, like, they look at Buffy and they immediately start making fun of her for being all by herself. I think they said, oh, there's Buffy and all her friends as she's walking alone.
Right.
It's aha, funny, whatever. But like, some of these kids definitely don't look like they're in high school, like, at all. I don't know if that stuck out to you, but I'm like,
yeah. I mean, in addition to the kids not looking like they belong in high school, I think this episode has some of the most cringeworthy dialogue we've seen so far this season. Okay,
well, I'm looking forward to hearing that from you. So. These are bullies. There's a pack of bullies, and then there's a big deal. They're going to go see the hyena house, or they want to go see the hyena house, though it's closed off for quarantine, I believe. Mm-hmm. And Xander follows the group in, right, to the hyenas.
He does, but he has like a really great reason for doing so. He's seen them bullying one of the other kids, and he's following them to protect this kid that he sees them bully.
That's right. Yeah, this is him being a bit of a hero, because the rest of the episode he's going to be on the side of the villains, right, by no choice of his own. But that's what happens. So he follows them in, and Willow and Buffy, they're stopped by a zookeeper, right?
Yes, the zookeeper who tells Buffy and Willow this stuff that you've just mentioned about the hyenas having just come from Africa, and they're under quarantine until other matters get resolved.
That's right, and he's he comes back in the episode, but he's a guy in the know right now. And while they're in the hyena house, there's this moment where the hyena's eyes flash green, I think, and the bullies and Xander, all their eyes flash the same color in return. So that's how you know something has happened. That there's this kind of growing foreboding sense in the music, and then I think we cut to the opening credits. Which I have a question for you about opening credits.
Sure.
I probably should be studying this more before I ask the question, but how do they get all the scenes for opening credits? Have they filmed a lot more? I mean, because I know that a lot of these scenes haven't been, they're in episodes we've seen, but does they film a lot more before they start releasing the show? Do you know?
Yeah, actually, I do know about this one. I know that they filmed the entirety of season 1 before they started releasing it.
Okay. So they can just cut it up whenever they want and however they want.
I don't know that they had everything like edited together and all the special effects done and all that mess before they started releasing it, but they had definitely finished filming before they started releasing.
Okay. So when we go back to daily life outside the zoo, right? Now Xander starts acting funky, wouldn't you say?
Oh, yeah. The very next scene that we see is with Xander and Buffy and Willow in the Bronze. And the two things that Xander does that are supposed to clue you in that he's acting weird is, number one, he eats Buffy's croissant.
Yes.
And number two, he starts sniffing Buffy.
He sniffs, yeah. Oh, yes. And he says, you showered.
That's right.
Because I'm known for it. He goes, That's okay. Like that's okay. It made me laugh so hard because we've got a dog, and just Colleen's always saying how gross the dog is. And if there's like a dead animal in the road, the dog wants to go sniff it out, right? The dog is interested in what we gross. So he sniffs her. You showered? Yeah, I'm known to have. I'm known for it. And he's like, that's okay. And they talk about him being weird and wanting to get out of here. And I love his response. He goes, I like it right here. Like he knows he's got a vibe. He needs to be there. So there's enough to interest him as he's kind of out playing the field, as it were, or he's out hunting, was what it seems like.
Right. In the scene, they do a really good job of sort of recapping a couple things for the audience if they don't know them, like the fact that Buffy is sort of quasi interested in Angel romantically.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And that Willow is interested in Xander romantically, and they sort of like dialogue wise give you a little like expository spill there in a way that didn't really feel like exposition, just to make sure that people who haven't seen the episode catch up. That's one of the things, to be honest with you, I kind of miss about this era of television, when things were linked together, but maybe the whole season wasn't a continuing story. Because the way that it is now, when I watch TV, they don't bother to like set things up this way because they're assuming everyone has seen all of the previous episodes and don't need to deal with that. But I find that for me personally, and this is old man shouting at the wall kind of stuff. I find that for me personally, whenever I'm watching an episode of anything, it may have been weeks or months since the last time I've seen it, and getting a quick, oh yeah, that's what I'm supposed to be thinking about here is a good thing.
Yeah, and the way it comes across is not sort of, it seemed more natural than the last time.
Absolutely.
Right. Yep. You're right. It seemed natural. So yeah, so that's happening there at the Bronze, and Xander's acting funky, and in comes the pack, right? The pack walks in. And that's when Xander notices his own. Basically, it's very clear that he's becoming part of the pack just by his actions. And he's also getting kind of cruel toward Willow. I mean, he's not being kind to her. They've been best friends since they were kids, basically. I mean, that's actually how they put it in other episodes. Yes. I think this episode, she says, we haven't always been the closest, but nevertheless, they've known each other forever. Right. And he starts getting short with her, and then later mean.
Yeah, and then the next scene, we cut to the library where Buffy is training with Giles for ever the briefest of moments. I think this was another little bit that was tossed in there to make sure that we understood relationship-wise what we're supposed to remember about people, or new information if we haven't seen the show before. But Giles says something about how he's lost all the feeling in his arms as a result of this training. So it's making sure that that Buffy's super strong, even though we haven't seen anything from this episode that helps us remember these kind of little bits. I thought that this episode was unusual compared to the other episodes that we've seen, because this one was very choppy in terms of how fast the scenes were. Like in most of the other episodes we've seen, the scenes go on for, 5-ish or more minutes. I don't think that there was a single scene in this that lasted for longer than a couple of minutes.
Okay, I didn't notice that, but it did seem to move quickly. I mean, just as I watched it last night, it seemed to kind of, maybe that's why it felt like that to me. So I thought, Giles is kind of stuffy and fun. Just had this little fun little moment. Yeah, if I can get arms back, my feeling in my arms back, and he walks off. Then we cut there to like there's a pig in the school.
Yep, it's the mascot.
Yes, this part was a bit cheesy. Some
of the cringy dialogue I was referencing earlier.
Right. Yeah. So there's this pig running through, a dressed up pig running through the school, and the principal Flutie is chasing after it, and Buffy picks it up, and it's got like a little helmet on and like a little razorback and all this stuff, because I guess their mascot is the Razorbacks or whatever.
Apparently their mascot is the Razorbacks, and this is the pig that's going to be the physical incarnation of said mascot.
Yes, and Buffy thinks it's cute, and that's when Principal Flutie's like, bring it with you. Like, doesn't want to hold it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that was great. Of course, you don't have to think hard about it to realize this pig is simply just something for this new hyena human pack of bullies, including Xander, to think about and to torment, I think, and to probably just eat, right?
Eventually.
Yes.
By the way, the pig's name is Herbert.
Herbert. Why?
I have no idea. I just thought that was funny.
Yeah. Okay.
I just thought it was funny that they mentioned that his name was Herbert. It's like it makes him even less like Flutie is trying to express that the pig's supposed to be mean and defiant and the mascot or whatever. And then he named Herbert. It's like the wrong.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's also what Buffy notices too. Xander's acting a little funky, smelling her. He's getting a little surly. He's hanging out with the bullies, and then Herbert the pig sniffs Xander, smells Xander, and takes off in fear.
Yep.
Which then makes Buffy then go to Giles and say, "Hey, you know what? Xander's a little off." And I think Giles' explanation or response is kind of humorous, but also like just inconsistent, right? Well, he's a 16-year-old boy, so
I think that this was this episode's attempt at expressing what the metaphor is supposed to be.
Oh yes, when I watched it, I went right back to your metaphor of teenage life, right? I mean, it was pretty obvious. Yeah. So
and usually they have it in dialogue somewhere in the episode. I find that in the later episodes, it's very close to the beginning. In these episodes, it's somewhere in the middle, which I thought was interesting because I hadn't noticed that before.
Yeah, so Giles doesn't think it's anything at first until, and the thing that makes him look into it is that Herbert, the fearsome razorback piglet, is found dead. Yeah. So they start thinking about possession, and the question is, have animal spirits possessed humans before? So in literature and mythology and and all sorts of just kind of religious talk, there's anthropomorphism when we apply human characteristics to animals and or in God, right? Just so much of bad theology, I would say, is because we put human language to the concept of God, and therefore we end up limiting God. But there's this zoomorphism is kind of the reverse, when we put the animal features to the human, which mostly happens in art, right? Like when we think of mythological, animals, the Minotaur, or even in the Egyptian myths of gods, they look like different animals and things of that.
Right. Have different animal heads and stuff. Absolutely.
Right. And so what we have, just kind of in this case, is a group of people who are taking on the characteristics, right. Not the look, but the characteristics of the animals, as if they could be possessed. And I was really trying to think about whether or not I've ever even heard that kind of in some of this cryptozoological and kind of funky spiritualistic stuff I've studied. I don't know that I have seen that. I have seen people who have a strong affinity for creatures and animals, like take on characteristics, like the guy who lived with a pack of wolves. I don't know if you remember that documentary. They bite at the wolves and
right.
And, that kind of thing, try to act like them, but they're not possessed. They're just acting. That's an affect to show dominance. But anyway, that's what's happening, right?
Do you think that it's connected at all with like, I don't know, Native American spirit animal shamanism kind of stuff or anything like that? Did that?
I don't know. I'm not an expert, but I think in some generalized way. I try to just do a brief cursory search. I mean, there's interesting things like lycanthropes or werewolves, right? And there's different things like that in storytelling, right? Sure. But I'm not 100%. I couldn't speak to any specific tribal thought, but
sure, yeah. Sure. I do think that it's interesting that the werewolf is probably the most commonly referenced one, and that it's another dog kind of thing.
Yeah, now I have read a book recently on the success of the coyote in American continent, and the book was about the biology of coyote life as well as the mythology that did explore Native American storytelling about the coyote. The coyote, which is not a wolf, but it is it is a large wild canine. It is like the most successful like mammal or one of them or something like that on the continent, because it is in some sense an animal that follows human cultures and lives on the fringe of it, because our waste and our lives produce food for them and habitation for them. So they're involved in cities and involved in the wilderness, and there's been these profound stories of Coyote Man in Native American life, right? Sometimes a symbol of, a lot of times the coyote is a symbol of sexual prowess and power. There's, I mean, I should just, I've looked up the book and told you, but it was a fascinating read from the perspective of just seeing what the animal's like. I mean, it's incredible. In fact, I'll tell you one little anecdote. A couple of weeks ago, I was with my nephew. We were playing golf, and it was about 7:00, and we saw a coyote come out of the woods. And then we turned the corner on the hole, and we heard the pack of coyotes devouring something, like a whole pack howling. And when that coyote came out, it was very clear to me that he was trying to attract something to come back into the woods with him for the pack. In fact, all my nephews was happening, and 15 minutes later, we heard them all yipping and hollering at something.
Interesting.
And it was it was scary sounding to my nephew.
Sure. Well, on that note, that reminds me of the dodgeball game we should probably talk about.
Oh, man, I grew up in the era when that was still a game you could play. And I loved it. I have to admit it. I loved it. Now, you can't play dodgeball.
You're like the coach. God, this game is brutal.
Yeah, that reminded me of my teachers. I had all these teachers who told us, "Well, I'm only teaching because I didn't want to go to Vietnam." Yeah. But yeah. So they go play dodgeball in gym class, and there's Buffy on one side. She's the Slayer. She's got supernatural powers, and there's Willow, who's there with her, who's sweet, and Xander's friend, and there's Xander on the other side.
Yep,
you can tell his affect. I mean, he's looking for blood.
Sure.
And he does knock out Willow, and it's sad. I mean, you could see her. I mean, I could see my daughter in it. It really hurt my feelings for her.
Yeah. Sure.
And then at the very end, it's almost like, they could go for Buffy, who's basically on the other side by herself, or they turned on their own player who was not a part of the pack, who was a weak one, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's because they, in some sense, could smell or sense the dominance in Buffy.
Right.
And so they just went and did the easier thing, which is take the weakest link out. And it was brutal. And that's when the coach says, "God, this game's brutal."
Yeah, right. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Though, this is the other thing that I noticed about this episode, about this moment in my notes. I have a little line written here. It says, "This is the most serious episode by far so far."
Yeah.
There aren't nearly as many laugh out loud moments in this one as we've seen in previous episodes. This one is pretty. This one's towing the serious line and trying to make sure that we feel that this bullying thing is much more serious than some of the previous things that we've watched.
Well, yeah, it's bullying, and then there's nods to rape culture, right? Sexual promiscuity. Well, I mean, sexual dominance. We can get to that, but I mean, there's and then it was criticized for some of it as well.
What was it? Tell me about that. I haven't read any of that. Tell me about it.
Well, I mean, again, now I'm pulling up Wikipedia, and everyone, I watch the shows. I pull up Wikipedia just to make sure I'm following the narrative order correctly, because I didn't write notes on it.
Sure.
But I believe it says, when we talk about in the past, these Vox reviews and things, well, at any rate, there's a writer, this says under themes, Teresa Basile, in a series about consent issues in Buffy, cites Buffy as telling Willow that Xander tried his hand at felony sexual assault, but points out that he does not believe that she's attracted to dangerous men, that if he were dangerous and mean, she would be attracted to him. And this is before they find out that Angel's a vampire. However, Buffy and Willow were 100% angst-free after they realized Xander was possessed. And considering that both girls were treating it as a joke and laughing about the possession after it was over, a sincere, serious apology on behalf would have been completely out of place. I actually, now that I read that, I'm not sure if that's a criticism or not, but I think it is. Some sense of criticism, they just move on from it.
Yeah, I think this gets to one of the things that's a little bit weird about Buffy and as a show in general is this idea that Buffy is always attracted to the dangerous guy. In a future season, we'll talk about the line Spike has. He says, "The girl needs a little monster in her man."
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that the person you're quoting there is commenting on the idea that it's weird that maybe that's a characteristic they hadn't really developed yet for Buffy, which is why, I don't know. Anyway,
well, after this, there is a moment, right? Buffy does have a confrontation with Xander, right?
Yeah, that's what's coming up next, and it's cross edited. So Xander's having a confrontation with Buffy, while the pack is having a confrontation with Flutie, who's gone after them because he knows they ate the pig.
Yes, and he has them all in his office at once. I mean, it proves to be his downfall. He has a pack on him at once, right? He doesn't take them one by one.
Yep.
He has them all in the room.
Well, because he's telling them that he's seen some sick things before, but never as sick as eating this pig, and that's sort of a prelim for them attacking Flutie, and this is the death of Principal Flutie.
Right. Well, so it means two things. So it means Xander also helped eat the pig.
Yep.
But this saves Xander from actually killing a human being.
Yes.
Because he's messing around with Buffy. Right. And they do eat him. And later we find out there's not a lot left. But Giles knows that he's been eaten because he knows that this is a case of hyena spirit possession, right? I mean, that's right. But there isn't a lot left for cops or anybody. That they just assume wild dogs got into the school. Yeah, okay. No. But if anything, I guess. And and so then the confrontation with. By the way, how'd you feel about Flutie going out this way? He's been such a ridiculous personality the whole time. Is this proper for him? Is this his proper design?
I kind of liked Principal Flutie. I thought that he was very funny in the first few episodes, and to be honest with you, this is kind of a shocker. When I first saw it, the very first time that I saw it, I was like, "What? They ate the principal? That's insane!"
Right?
And I think that's one of the reasons this episode sticks with us. Is because of the downfall of Principal Flutie. I have to say that if it weren't for how good the next principal is, as far as a character. I probably would have been more disappointed by it, but I have to tell you, knowing who's coming up next, I'm glad that Principal Flutie exits. I'm just sad that he exited this way.
Yeah, I mean it's a good next principal, but yeah. Well, so let's talk about this engagement Buffy having with Xander, because it's a critical thing.
It is, and it's interspersed with the other stuff. I think to make. Well, to your point, it's definitely interspersed to make sure that the audience is clear. He did not kill a human. Xander did, but I also think that it's interspersed to make the eating of the human a little bit less severe, because we're constantly coming back to this interaction between Xander and Buffy. But that interaction is pretty severe too.
Yeah, no, I think they offset each other. I mean, basically, he is possessed by this hyena, but it's not taking over his identity completely, right? What we're seeing is it's amplified, basically the kind of toxic masculinity, or it's taken the male hormone monster that is adolescence and ramped it up, and so he's still in lust with Buffy. And, now he doesn't just declare that, but now he's basically saying that there's no way you couldn't have feelings for me. There's no way you couldn't want, me. And so, and it is very, it's rape oriented in his language, like of a guy who can't be turned down, a guy who can't believe a woman would deny him. And, using his physical body, and even though he might be thinking he's being seductive, it's very threatening, cornering, and he ends up even knocking her down and being on top of her. Of course, she gets the better of him, I believe.
Yes, yeah, she knocks him out. This actually comes up to a question that I have for you that I don't know that I know.
Okay.
So she immediately takes him to the library and tosses him in the cage in the library.
Yes.
Why is there a cage in the library?
Right. That is supposed to be the private stacks of Giles, I think. I've always wondered that. And the only thing I can think is that's where he keeps his private collection of books. The books that, and they're not, I don't think they're consistent, because I think his weird occult books are all throughout the library. And then in there, the more dangerous ones, and sometimes the weapons. And it's also inconsistent there's continuity issues, because that becomes the very cage that their friend later on, who's a werewolf, that's where he camps out on the full moons.
Yeah.
So it can hold him, but there's going to be a moment we see that the hyenas are able to get out, right? But yeah, why is there a cage? I think it's just convenience, and then they can say that it's where the private collection is kept, but it's kind of creepy.
Right.
Very creepy, actually. It's, yeah. But I don't know. Public schools are creepy places too.
True. True that. Well, okay, so then we see the pack sleeping in the woods, and a woman comes by wearing a backpack.
Yep.
Tell me about this scene.
I don't remember the scene right now. You said they get woken up by her, right? And
then they kind of chase her. But I think that this is I'm not sure that I remember the point of the scene, which is why you're probably going, I don't know what that was about. No, I
don't think it was that big of a thing, really. There's something that happens. There's there's this period of time where Buffy and Giles are kind of getting closer to what needs to happen.
Right.
Willow is in the library keeping watch over Xander, and she is on the computer doing what Willow does.
Right.
And that's the time that the packs sleep in the woods and they get interrupted by the woman. But Xander's trying to convince Willow to let her out, and Willow's kind of playing a smarter move. Like, she can tell whether he's the real Xander or the possessed Xander by how he behaves, and she's kind of taunting him a little.
Sure.
Somewhere along the line, that Buffy and Giles find out that the way hyenas will work, I think it's because they go to the zoo and they meet this zookeeper.
Right.
And they tell the zookeeper, and this is the part that I found really hokey. It's like they tell the zookeeper about this transpersonal possession thing, and he's like, "Well, gee, if that ever happened, this is what I'd do." And he just all seems to be too eager to believe them. He knows about it. He is everywhere, is every bit as esoteric nerd as Giles is. Yes. And tell them, well, I wouldn't really worry about it, because at some point the hyenas will track down the lost one, right? He also tells them after they eat, they sleep and they're pretty docile. And that's when the woman wakes them up.
Right.
So they've eaten and they're a little docile or whatever. And that's when they're safer. Well, as Willow is there with Xander, the pack has now been aroused. They're awake. They're tracking him down. They show up at the outside the library. They're looking in those half crescent moon or half moon windows. Yep. And Xander sees them after he's already tried to attack Willow. And she steps back. I knew it was you, And she turns around and she sees them coming in. They break into the library, and Willow books it. She books it to the classroom and she hides. And the other hyenas, I believe, get Xander out. Like, they just knock down the cage door, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
And then they're in pursuit. This is where I found it to be biologically untrue. They don't smell her. Only Xander tracks her down. He tells everyone to go one way, and he goes another. Right. And he walks into the room where she's been hiding. That's what happens next.
And that's when Buffy and Giles get back to the high school.
That's right. And there's this, I think, a bit of a they take a fire extinguisher, right? And they clunk someone in the head with it. And that's the
Which is a very Buffy move. We've seen this a few times, and I think we'll see it more times coming up. That's right.
That's right. It's a useful tool, and they get him, and then they're gonna go back to they're gonna lead everyone back to the zoo where the zookeeper is gonna help them with some sort of incantation.
Right.
Now, they show up. What happens? You remember what happens right away?
So they have some sort of confrontation. The pack does with a man and his wife in a car.
Mm-hmm.
And then meanwhile, Buffy and Giles and Willow get to the zoo where the actual hyena thing is.
The house. Yeah.
The actual hyena house. And at some point, the man with the blue mask shows up.
Yeah, the dude comes out and he says it's Maasai, the Maasai culture, and he comes out in the ritual attire. His face is painted like totally like wonderfully painted like a skeleton.
Right.
And he's going to perform this reverse spell, this possession spell, and Giles is going to help him. But Giles looks down and realizes he's standing on like this big drawn thing on the ground. And he's like, was this here before? He starts to realize in that moment that this guy who's gone like fully tribal with his outfit, and he's got like a walking cane or a magical ceremonial stick or something, and he's got the paint and all the stuff on. And he's like, Giles just realizes right before he's about to get pummeled by the guy that this guy's actually he's the guy who did the whole thing in the first place. He is looking for the power of the hyena to be present in him, not those pesky little kids. This is where I felt like you've said before, it's kind of like a Scooby-Doo.
Yeah, very, very much.
Yeah, and I would have gone away with it too if it weren't for you kids, because that was just an accident. That the pack and that Xander would become possessed, it was an accident. It was meant for this guy the whole time. Giles gets his butt whipped, which I always get bothered by because, later we find out Giles is he's not to be messed with on his own account. But that
feels very retconny to me after this first season,
Yeah.
because I think they realized that they needed Giles to be something other than the info dump, and so they started like messing with his backstory.
Yeah, give him one. Give him one. So Willow shows up at the hyena house before Buffy because Buffy's been busy with the other pack of hyenas trying to mess with other people. Mm-hmm. And this zookeeper ties her up, puts a knife to her throat, and said, this is the predatory act that's going to trigger the ritual and save the students. What he's not telling her is that it's going, she is truly going to, be a victim, and the whole power is going to go to him. Buffy arrives. The others are right behind her. The pack of them is able to knock Buffy down. There is a throwaway line in here that each one of them is just as strong as Buffy is. So now that there's a pack, she's outnumbered. And I also kind of don't buy that, knowing Buffy's prowess later on. I don't think that any one of them, I think she's still more than capable to handle this pack of hyenas. But that's where we're at in the story. And the warden, it says, uses this predatory act, right, to shout a spell that pulls the animal spirits from the students, from the pack, from Xander, and into himself. Yep. And then there's the fight between Buffy and this zookeeper.
Yep.
But what happens to him? What does Buffy do to him to best him?
She does she kick him over the side of the rail? Is that what happens?
Yeah, she does something, and she knocks him over. Yeah. The point is his fate. I asked to set up the fate. He's eaten himself by the pack of actual hyenas, and then the gang leaves, and just like that, they're saved from the spell.
Yep.
I think all of them are in for some sort of nightmare after they digest that raw pig.
Yep.
And then the other ones are going to be in for a whole nother nightmare that's just Principal Flutie. But hey, we don't have to bother with that part of the story. Because this is like, as you say, this is teen drama. So really the big problem is Xander's embarrassed.
That's right.
Xander has overstepped and overspoken, and he's been cruel, and now he's got to deal with it, right?
And
So
walk it back.
right. So the next day, he
Doesn't remember anything.
lies to Buffy, right? He says that he has no memory whatsoever of the things he said or the things he did while he was possessed. And his friends are like totally cool with it. Like they're totally nice to him. They totally accept it. They believe that. They buy it. And then tell us what happens.
So then Giles catches him after he walks away from the girls, and he says, I can't find any references to memory loss being associated with this condition. And then Xander's reply to this is something to the effect of, did you tell them that? And Giles says, your secret dies with me.
Your secret dies with me. This is sort of, given the whole context, especially with kind of the rapiness of it all, this is sort of a boys culture, boys be boys sort of thing that I don't think comes off well.
No, it doesn't.
I don't think that's the intention of the show. I think that they were combining things like him being mean to his friend, and him having. I think what it does is it takes very seriously that adolescent boys have terrible feelings that are hard to control, but it expands them so much that it crosses the line into what is predatory, and that's the problem. It crosses that line, and so yep. While Giles should be able to say, "I will never tell your friends that you had these." Sexual fantasies or feelings or whatever. I will never tell them that you struggled with your thought life, or that that you really meant when you expressed your love for them. Like those are things that he could totally understand and let go with them. But he shouldn't be able to understand that it crossed the line into predatory behavior. That's not okay. And so I think I just say that in case anyone's hearing this, like we are.
No, I totally agree. In fact, I don't think that I haven't seen this episode since all the stuff came out about Whedon. And as you've been talking, I've been thinking, well, I don't think that Whedon, I mean, to your point from last time we talked, I don't think Whedon wrote this one, but I know that he rewrote all of the episodes in the first season. So he definitely had a hand in it. And I also know from interviews with other staff writers that a lot of them just straight up give Whedon credit for all the laugh out loud moments. They'll be like, "Hey man, my script was okay," and then Whedon came in, did a rewrite or whatever, and suddenly it worked, because he pulled things out of it that weren't there before, or pulled things out of it that were there that weren't clear, and all those sorts of things. And I think that this one is far more serious than any of the other episodes in terms of tone. It's far more choppy than any of the other episodes. It feels like it's moving really fast at times. There are two sequences that are slow in this. One is the dodgeball sequence, and the other one that's slow is there's like a montage sequence at some point in the middle of this. And I think that when we get to this ending point that we're describing right now, where your secret dies with me or whatever, I think that there's sort of a wink nod to the audience about how Xander's going to have to process this, and it's going to be tough for him. And it does come back. There's an episode later on where Xander mentions something about what he experienced as a hyena, and Willow goes, "Hey, you said you didn't remember any of that." So he isn't completely safe from it. But in this episode, it feels like he is.
Yeah. Yeah, the AV Club's review of this episode gave this one a B, and it does say, I appreciate it. It does say that they feel like the ending was clumsily handled, and rushed and muddled, and I think that's true. I mean, I think that there's more that can be said. So the metaphor is almost certainly that adolescent male. I mean, even though there's some women in the pack, it's certainly with Xander, it's almost certainly this adolescent male sexual testosterone being turned on, ignited it. And obviously the metaphor extends to the social aspect of bullying and groupthink and that kind of thing, and the kind of the insatiable appetite And I think that's interesting, and I think there's a way to even show that can go into dark places like predatory behavior, but it doesn't handle that part well. The general metaphor for like a werewolf or for the wolf man, it calls to mind the fact that we all have the capacity for an inner monster, that each person has this capacity for anger or violence or something that is something that maybe even a sense of being out of control of yourself. And so I think it touches that metaphor, even though it's the hyena and not necessarily a wolf. I think it touches that, but I just think with all the storylines and all the layers, it ends up making it such that tying a nice little bow at the end of this left this huge problem that I thought.
Yeah, totally. That's one of the problems with the 42-minute drama of this time period, you know?
Yeah. Well, I think I think it's probably, even though with these criticisms, in terms of the show kind of getting to you, kind of pulling you in, this is one of the better ones in the first season thus far.
Sure.
I think it really leaned heavily on that metaphor for the way that it can pull a story along. So I think it bled all the juice out of it, as it were. But so I think in some ways they're getting the storytelling is getting better, maybe, and
they definitely had a lot more going on with character. They definitely had a lot more going on with visual storytelling. Like there are huge sequences in this that don't have much dialogue. You know?
Yeah. It is a monster of the week sort of thing, and it is that Scooby-Doo vibe, you know, for sure. And but yeah, so there you go. I don't know that I have anything else to add to it except for
no. So I think we're agreed that the ending of this is problematic. We don't think Xander should be getting a free pass here at the end. And but I do think that there are a lot of things that happen in this episode that foreshadowed the future of the series.
Yeah, that's right. And yeah. So we say goodbye to Principal Flutie.
Yep.
Look forward to a new principal.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps a small man. And we look forward to getting back. Now it gives us a little more juice to get back to find out what's going on with Angel.
That's right.
Yeah. So, all right, my friend, that's what I got.
That's what I got too, man. I think I'm looking forward to the next one, and I can't believe we're almost halfway through the first season.
The short season, but yeah, we're getting there. We're getting through the tough one. So, all right, my friends, hope you have a great one.